or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hi everybody, good evening to you and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio, where this evening we're going to be discussing girls in the game, tackling misogyny, body confidence and belonging in schools. Really looking forward to this conversation. I'm sure it's going to be really important for anybody who's interested in sport in schools. Joined this evening on TTR, very privileged and honoured to be joined by Stacey Mullock, who we'll introduce in a minute a bit more, and Helen Tonks. And my co-host is Ray Whitehouse, regular TTR host, Ray, the legend. So this evening we're going to talk a little bit about the FA and Barclays Made for this game campaign. But before we actually get into that and what that offers, it's worth painting a bit of a picture of where this show really comes about from. So as it stands, 90% of schools now offer girls equal opportunities to play football, but there's still barriers. So 63% of teachers say that resilience and confidence are the areas that girls need to develop the most. 56% of teachers don't feel confident discussing misogyny in schools. And we're really going to discuss multiple barriers, but a big one we're going to discuss is obviously misogyny, alongside body confidence and general belonging in schools today. So we're really looking at where we're at now and how we're moving forward and what we're doing in schools to really address these issues and overcome these issues and make a difference. So as we go along, if you're interested in finding out more, of course, you can just go into Google and type in Barclays FA Made for this game. We'll put up the website later if you want to check out a bit more detail on the things that we're going to be discussing this evening. First things first, Stacey and Helen, maybe starting with Stacey, do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself, your journey, and where your passion for girls' sport comes from?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Yeah, my current role is Head of Development at the FA. Been here for almost 7 years, kind of joined just pre-COVID to manage the legacy programme for the Women's Euros, which was due to be in 2021, ended up being 2022. And hopefully many people remember that significant day at Wembley when we won our first Euros, which was amazing. But I guess my kind of journey started a long time ago. So growing up, BMX racing was my sport. So not football as a youngster. Did really well, kind of travelled all over the place, ended up being a world champion at one stage, but it was very male dominated and I didn't have a negative experience of it, but it was just at the time you look around and you think actually there aren't that many girls that I can race against when I was a very young racer. And that's where my kind of passion for sport kind of started, went on and did a degree in sports science and then I've been in sport development ever since. But I think especially at the FA, when you look at the gap between the number of female players and the number of male players that we have in the game, there's still so much for us to do. And I know we're going to talk about everything that we're doing in schools, which is so important. But on the whole, there's still a significant gap between the male and female opportunities that we have. Yeah, so that's me.
Sure. And Helen?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm Helen Tonks. I'm a school games organiser in Aston in Birmingham, so inner city, very deprived area, very multicultural. I'm also a strategic lead for the girls' football in that area. So this is where we sort of tie in with what Stacey was talking about earlier. In terms of my own journey, I was sport mad when I was at school. I went to an all-girls school We had every opportunity that you could imagine, but the one sport that was discouraged was football. And we had to really fight for a girls' football club after school. And that was something that, you know, our geography teacher, ironically, he really pushed for us to be able to have an hour after school. And we managed to achieve that. And that was something that we then accessed. So I guess in terms of where we are now, for me, it's about making sure that every girl in our schools across Aston has that opportunity to fully access football if they want to. And try and remove some of the barriers. We're a very deprived area that comes with real challenge. And so for us, it's about how can we give all girls access to physical activity and football, whether that is playing, refereeing, coaching. And we're really passionate about making sure that girls have those opportunities.
Got you. Well, I mentioned in the intro that 90% of schools now offer girls equal access to football. So obviously that's real progress. So to continue to grow, what barriers still need to be overcome? And more than that, what's really going on, you know, beneath the surface, if you like?
Yeah, I think we have 58 schools that we work with across Aston. So we work with secondary, primary, faith schools, single gender schools, the whole range. And for us, it's really about going into that young person's world and not expecting them to come into ours. And I think sometimes that's where those misunderstandings in terms of barriers are. We have to get better at understanding what those barriers are for young people. And of course, they differ in different groups, different communities. For us, we've done a lot of work with our Muslim girls because we recognise that was a group that were not accessing football opportunities through the girls' football partnerships. And they came back with some really interesting things that we've not even really considered. So things I know we're going to go on to talk about things like PE kit and feeling comfortable. But I think ultimately all of the feedback came back to the same thing, and that's feeling safe in the environment that they're playing in, and feeling like
was that specific to the Muslim girls, or are you talking in general?
I think with all girls, they would say they want to feel safe in that environment, but there are cultural barriers with certain demographics that we have to be sensitive to. So we're really lucky at Aston that we have a split site. It's gated, so nobody can walk past the fields that we do our football in. So you don't get that footfall of men and boys maybe saying things that are derogatory towards the girls. And our girls know when they come to our site that it's safe, it's far away from everybody else. They can be themselves, they can express themselves. And there's a whole range of other things that we've put in place to try and engage. We talk to them about what music they want to hear. Which sounds like a really small thing, but when you add all these things together, it's transformative for those girls. The other thing that comes out really strongly from our Muslim girls is this fear of their hijab coming off during the game. So they need to feel that there's somewhere they can go, adjust their hijab and come back out and play. And if they're miles away from changing rooms, for example, they don't feel that safety. So there are cultural considerations in our partnership that maybe you wouldn't get elsewhere in the country. But you're right, Tom, there are some commonalities regardless of which girls you talk to.
And did you, on that particular issue, did you sort of look for a solution on that? Do you have a solution to that, or is that something that's just come up and you don't really have a solution to that?
Yeah, as I say, we're really lucky that our changing rooms are right next to our fields. But we really strategically look when we're working with schools about what's the right venue, where is the right place to play this game or do this coaching or this refereeing training. And we're really strategic in where we put them because of the feedback that we've had from girls. And the more that we implement that feedback, and crucially, we feed that back to the girls as well, so they know that their opinions have been heard, the more engagement that we get. And we've had a sort of hockey stick moment with football with our girls in our area, and most of it is because of we really try to listen to where the barriers are. The other thing that we've done that springs to mind is we're an all boys grammar school, so having sanitary products in our changing rooms is not the norm. We've made sure that sanitary products are available in all of our venues. And, you know, half the population of this country knows what it's like to have a period and not have something with you. And you can multiply that embarrassment out 100 times for a young person. So they know that it's a trusted site. They can come to me as a trusted adult and ask for those sorts of things. So again, these all sound really tiny things and it's not rocket science, but when you put them together as a whole package, it's amazing what a difference it can make to girls.
I think just to jump in from kind of, you mentioned the 90%, which is a figure that we've celebrated, you know, and it's with thanks to people like Helen. There's another roughly 319 of Helen up and down the country that are kind of facilitating access to football for girls in schools with the help of Barclays. But what I would say is that just because the door is now open doesn't mean that every girl is walking through it. So teachers and schools are doing an amazing job at making sure that there are these opportunities, particularly in PE lessons, which is probably where the first experience of playing football will come for a lot of our girls. And I guess when I was at school, it just wasn't the done thing. Helen's already mentioned it. You know, when you were at school, it was girls go and play netball and hockey, boys go and play football and rugby and cricket in the summer or whatever. But now actually, if a girl wants to play football in a PE lesson, like, why shouldn't she be able to do that? So the work that the schools are doing is absolutely amazing, but we're still getting feedback that, you know, girls are not welcome in that boys space, and almost like, well, you kick like a girl, or girls don't play football. And there's one kind of stat from an 11-year-old boy that was saying, but girls just aren't as good at football. And when you ask him where that comes from, he doesn't know. It's just been ingrained. It's like in society that that's the narrative, that girls don't play, like they go and do other things. But actually, like, the Euros was a big turning point for us. And I think the visibility of the team and men in particular bringing their daughters to the games, having it on the TV screens, like, there was such big reach from that tournament that we are seeing that change. But there's still those kind of barriers day to day that I'm sure many schools can, you know, affiliate with, if you like. So there's still a long way to go. And this is kind of where this whole campaign is trying to help.
I think Stacey,
again, sorry.
Sorry,
Helen, you go on.
I was just going to say, it's interesting what you say about equal access, because to me, it means different things in different areas. And I absolutely agree with what you just said about, for me, that equal access in Aston looks very different to other parts of the country. And just providing opportunities, that's not enough for our girls. You know, we have to walk them to the door of opportunity a lot of the time, because they don't have the confidence to do that themselves. And sometimes we've got to give them a bit of a nudge through that door as well. So I think equal access is an amazing sort of concept across the country, and the statistics are amazing. But we have to think, when we're in schools and we're working with schools, how that actually lands and how young people and girls are engaging with that. And it's different in different parts of the country.
It is. And just to give an example, we had a sports day for one of our year groups yesterday. So we do separate days for separate year groups, reduces the chaos. And there were the football tournament type thing was going on. Didn't quite work as a tournament, but that was going on before it got rained out. So I think all those managed to happen. But it was anybody from the forums. I work at a school with girls and boys, and anybody could have joined the football teams. It wasn't segregated. But there were still one or two, maybe two girls on each team. And it wasn't that, because I went around and I spoke to them. I was like, I know some of these girls that aren't playing right now in those forums like this sport. I know they like to play, and I know they're quite good at it. One of them's with an academy, and they're not on the pitch. And I went and I spoke to them, and they'd say things like, the boys said, I have to swap in with the other girl if I want to play, or, oh, there's already one girl on there. And it's like, what? You're so good, and it's there, and the opportunity's there, but it's not enough to say anyone can sign up for the team and just expect there to be some sort of fairness or equality. It's not about, bullying girls into doing sports they don't want to do. It's about encouraging the ones that do want to do it to be able to do it. And it's still very much not happening.
And I also think that's where the girls only sessions become really important for those that maybe not for those that are already in academies. And I guess at the top end of the pathway, from a talent perspective, we do encourage our talented girls to play mixed football. But for an entry level, sometimes that safety that Helen talked about, and that security, and that taking out that worry about what the boys think or might say, or I don't want to feel stupid giving something a go for the first time. That's why a lot of our girls only sessions work, because they feel that protection almost, and just really simple things like having a protected day on a primary school lunchtime for girls to play football on the pitch that they have at school is actually the thing that has made the biggest difference for us, and allowing girls to maybe just try it in that comfortable environment for the first time.
Yeah, I went to a Muslim girls conference that the Youth Sport Trust ran at St Andrews in Birmingham a few months ago. And the behaviour change of just having all girls in a room and having really strong female Muslim women in sport, it was quite breathtaking, actually. The confidence level was completely different than you'd see in a mixed environment. And I think, whilst I'm not an advocate of splitting boys and girls up into separate gender groups for everything, I think there really is a benefit, particularly in a physical environment where our girls sometimes do lack that confidence. Or you're getting comments like you just mentioned, Ray, where we're swapping one girl with another and we're not actually, promoting this view of female empowerment and inequality. So I think where it's beneficial in terms of building that confidence, great. But let's try and find a way to bring those male allies with us as well and not exclude them from the conversation. We've got some incredible male staff that they stand at the side of their girls' football pitches and they are just as passionate and they care just as much about the girls as they do for the boys. So I think it's really important not to exclude that male voice from the conversation.
Yeah. We've mentioned some of the barriers there. So for teachers listening to this, and by the way, welcome to everybody who's watching and listening live. It's nearly 50 people. Welcome to you, and do write in, post a comment, post a question, post a thought, anything you want to say, do it. But for those people who are listening right now, why does this conversation belong in the classroom and not just on the pitch?
I think from my perspective, it's because those emotions, and those characteristics of confidence, self-belief, all of those kind of things, they're carried with them. These things are carried with the child throughout every single lesson of the day and the rest of their life. So if they having a bad experience at school, that's something that I talk to people in their 40s and 50s that had terrible experiences in PE, and it's almost scarred them for life. They look back on that as a really, bad period in their life. So all of those characteristics that I've just talked about are things that young people carry with them. And I think back to my time in school, we didn't really have social media. We didn't have anywhere near the amount of pressure that young people have on their shoulders these days. So the more we can do to support some of those characteristics and the holistic child, the more we should do it. And I think, this isn't just a PE thing. These are conversations for me that should be had across subjects. And it should be something that's being discussed whole school. And we know where schools get this right and students feel confident to share their views on these things, that they are healthier and happier. And if they're healthier and happier, they're learning. And ultimately, for a school, that's the purpose of education, isn't it? And we've seen that this has major impacts on attendance, punctuality, behaviour, willingness to learn. So all of these things that schools really, hold highly in their schools, we can impact through these conversations. But ultimately, we want to send our girls into the world as confident human beings. And I think, so I know we're going to touch on the Breaking Barriers resource, and Stacey will probably talk more about this, but it's just such a great start point for teachers that maybe you're a little worried about having these conversations with young people.
Well, yeah, this is sorry, Stacey, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think boys in particular, or the misogynistic comments that come out, that they don't start on the football pitch. Like they've been learned, they're a learned behaviour, they're a learned kind of way of thinking that probably starts at home. And this isn't having a dig at parents. Like, I'm a parent to 2 kids and I get how hard it is. And if I think about some of my friends, they've got just quite traditional views, particularly around football. It's our national sport. They've seen the men's team play for a number of years. The FA banned women's football for 50 years, which wasn't our best idea. But it's kind of been part of our societal footprint that it's been a male-only sport. So it's about changing that narrative, and there's no better place for us as a national governing body of the game to start that than within schools. Like, teachers play such an influential role in having access to our young people, and really, I guess what we're saying is that we want to use football as that bridge and to have that conversation and to start that conversation in a very safe environment in a classroom. And some of these resources will just allow teachers that may not feel that comfortable starting a conversation around this topic. It'll allow them to do it in a really familiar kind of format that is talking about football. The World Cup starts today. Like, it's quite timely, really, around how you might want to introduce this topic into some of your lessons.
Which is important, because over half of teachers say that they're not confident discussing these things. And I think that's all teachers that are, out of everybody, over half aren't confident discussing issues around misogyny. So what, in your view, what does a good conversation about misogyny look like? What does misogyny look like? And how can teachers be talking about that and starting those conversations?
I think for me, just before I answer that one, this isn't just about teachers. We have lots of adults working in schools, and a lot of this misogynistic behaviour actually occurs at lunchtime. So in primary school, we've got lunchtime supervisors on that yard with those children. I would expect them to be challenging those sorts of comments. So this isn't just solely at teachers, it's any adult that's interacting with children. And Stacey makes a fantastic point that actually this does start at home with parents, carers, whoever looks after those young people. But I think in schools, and I've had many conversations where I've challenged a comment that a boy has made towards a girl playing football. I had a really interesting conversation a while ago with a year 5 pupil who was stood at the side of the football pitch, and the primary school had given one afternoon a week over to girls' football. And there was a line of boys that were more than unhappy about this decision. And I got into this conversation with a year 5 about equality, which is quite an interesting thing to do anyway. And he just said to me, "This isn't fair." And I said, "Well, why do you think it's not fair?" "Well, we've had an afternoon taken off us." And I said, "Right, how many have you got left?" 4. And I could see the cogs going round in his head, thinking, actually, I can see your point. And for me, it's about having a conversation, asking lots of questions, understanding where that's come from. Because as Stacey says, these are learned behaviours. No boy is born as a misogynist. They've learned that from somewhere. And I think we've got to have these conversations with empathy and understanding, and it has to be non-confrontational. If that's something that's more endemic in the school, that's a wider issue. But I think 99% of the time, I think young people say things that they don't really understand the context of what they're saying. And it's not coming from an inherently bad place. It's just something they've heard or picked up on, or somebody else has said and they've just repeated it. But I do think it gives us a really good platform to start having that conversation. And as Ray said, that's a more natural way into that conversation than an assembly or a lesson, and maybe a less threatening environment as well.
To be fair, in a different context, but reflecting on what you said, Helen, about it being more or less sort of embedded, they're not saying it. They're saying it because that's been almost programmed into them to think that way, maybe to a point. But, there was one example. This was maybe last month. I was talking to a group of year 11 girls, and it was, I can't even remember what they were talking about, but one of them said to one of the others, "That's gay," right? And it was very embedded in do you understand what I mean? So when I then made that really awkward, so I just made it really awkward for them, because there was only the 5 of us in the room at this point. So I just sort of stopped, and I challenged it, basically. But I think teachers now it is difficult. I think some teachers feel nervous about challenging particular issues. Maybe if they get it wrong, should they challenge at all? Would it be better to just pretend I didn't see that or pretend I didn't hear that for my own self-preservation? You know, what would you say to those teachers and to those adults, those learners? But there may be some lunchtime supervisors who may think, you know what, I'm in here for an hour a day. It's not my job. It's not my place to police, you know, this, that, and the other. I'm just gonna, you know, make sure there's no sort of serious physical problems, and then I'm going to leave.
It's ironic, actually. You talk about lunchtime supervisors, and I've heard of an occasion where a lunchtime supervisor has actually stopped girls going to play, even if they want to play with the boys at lunchtime. They'll say, "What you're doing? Football isn't for girls. You go play over there. That's the boys are playing football." And again, it's just tradition. It's the way that they've been brought up. It's like an old way of thinking. But I think what we're trying to do with the resources is just open the conversation. This doesn't have to be challenging. You're not trying to teach people right or wrong. You're just asking the questions, and you know, you might get some of the worksheets that talk about, I don't know, you've got a secretary. Like, what does a secretary look like? What, you know, describe them. What do they look like? Draw them on a piece of paper. What about a builder? What about a footballer? How long's the hair? Is it, you know, and, you know, quite often they'll draw a man, like a male figure for a footballer. And then you go, oh, actually, you know, have you seen Leah Williamson? Do you know who Millie Bright is? Have you got, it's just those kinds of topical conversations that you can use football that, you know, a lot of kids are interested in, whether they play or whether they're just a fan and they watch it on the TV. It's just a conversation starter. So it doesn't have to be this really technical kind of overwhelming topic that people are scared of. It's just using it as a bit of a tool, as a bit of an opener.
Yeah, I think also sorry,
I was just going to say, I think that there's so many layers to that and so many aspects of how it could be used. It could be pitched differently according to age quite easily. Like whether you've got really, really young students, there's ways into that conversation that way. And whether you're talking to a year 11, I think you could adapt it as well. Sorry, Helen, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, we've got to be brave as educationalists, and, you know, we're the adults in the room. And as I said earlier, if we feel, you know, embarrassed or maybe, you know, we're a bit reticent to have this conversation, that's multiplied out 100 times for that young person. And they may have lots of questions, and they're looking for that trusted adult to have that conversation with. So we've got to be braver at tackling some of these conversations, even though we may feel uncomfortable to do it. Because again, these are things that you take forward into adult life. And that misogynistic comment on the playground in year 5 then turns into something completely different when they're 18. And, you know, I work in an all boys grammar school. We actively promote, you know, International Women's Day. We promote our female staff. We do lots to make sure that our boys are equipped to go into the world, because there are women in the wider world. They're probably going to have a female boss at some point. They're going to work with women. They need to be equipped to be able to deal with that and understand the environment and the world we live in. And I you know, we're really proud of a school, as a school, to be able to do that and to shape those sort of young minds going forward. But if we don't do that at a young age, what we get later on is some of the, you know, things that we've seen on social media recently, which are the extreme end of that. So the younger that we can start having those conversations, the better.
Tim's made a comment, which I guess plays into what you were just saying. He said opening the conversation feels important, because if we immediately shut things down, then students will go elsewhere to explore their opinions, which can often confirm negative and inappropriate views. And I agree with this. And part of this is about classroom management from a teaching perspective is, if you think that a student has been misogynistic or anything else that you think, it's how you approach that. I like what you said, Helen, about asking questions maybe, or trying to approach it in a way. If you go in with the sergeant major thing, the moment you hear anything that you think is something, then you're opening yourself up to it. I think you need to approach with care, calmness, and, you know, and approach it in a way where, yeah, you know what, we're not going to shut this down, but we are going to challenge it, and we are going to actually have the conversation about this. We're not going to, but we're also not going to do a sergeant major thing of sort of, you know, this is more a general thing of like shouting or getting, you know, sort of, I don't know, getting irate. I think it's better to, and that would apply to any situation really, stay calm and have that conversation with them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think as well, there's almost two things, isn't there? There's kind of what do we do with potentially the boys that are airing their views in that way? And I think you're right around the non-confrontation bit. And it's not because they're bad people, it's because they're, you know, they've got this from somewhere as they've grown up. But I also think if a girl doesn't feel confident to step onto a football pitch and almost take her place in a sport that is open for everyone, how's she ever going to be confident to step into a boardroom or a leadership role when she's older, or everything that Helen said around the qualities and the skills that sport gives you around resilience and leadership and self-confidence and self-belief. It's such a knock-on effect that if we don't tackle it at the early stages within school, it will affect young girls for the rest of their lives. And you see it now, those that have had that experience of feeling self-confident, they go on to do great things, but you know, these little things can really have a longer term impact.
They can. So you've mentioned the Breaking Barriers resources a few times. How do they support schools and teachers and everyone working in schools with all of these things? What is that about?
It's an opening conversation. So we've got things on the website that are assembly packs. We've got work packs for both primary school educators, secondary school teachers. There's lots of different resources that are real quick wins. They don't just have to be done in a PE lesson. They might want to be done in PSHE. There's lots of little kind of examples, such as what I've just mentioned about kind of what do people think of these particular roles in society, but also almost like where are the positive and negative comments coming from? So there's things around body confidence that you can look at that talk about, I've got a really powerful kind of strong body compared to, I don't want to look at myself in a mirror. They're just statements that you can kind of put into a broader context where boys and girls can put them into almost like a positive and a negative pile. And again, it's just sparking that conversation. So it's not rocket science, and it's certainly not kind of football trying to preach to teachers around what they should do. It's just, we know that we've got influence as a sport with thousands of young people. And actually, if we can use football as the conversation to help some of these wider societal, you know, issues that are becoming more and more prevalent, then that's what they're there to do.
I think the other thing for me is that we have to really think about where we're going to have these conversations and the environment around those young people. So having it in a sort of changing rooms for 5 minutes as they're coming in and out, that really doesn't work for me. It has to be a space where we actually give time for the conversation and properly listen to the answers as well. And I've found that when we've had conversations with girls in particular, they want to tell me their opinions. They do want to talk about these subjects. And actually, I think some of the time it's us that's the barrier, because we're not providing that environment and the time to speak about it properly. And as I said before, it's really important we close that feedback loop. So if they are telling us things that are barriers, that we act on them and then feedback that we've acted on those things, or even better, we co-design with young people and we take them on that journey to remove those barriers with us. And that leads to, you know, empowerment and feeling that sense of belonging in the game even more so. So for me, it's about that environment where in the school week we have these conversations, and we know that teachers lack time to do this kind of work, but it's so important to that learning journey for that young person. And as I said before, if they're unhappy, they don't learn and they don't thrive. And these kind of conversations are really important for that school environment and the thriving in that educational sense.
Yeah. So I know some of our listeners might be wondering the resources, what they're pitched at. Are these things for all different key stages, all different subject teachers? Is it limited to a particular group?
Yeah, no, they are. There's a wide range, and you can kind of select them. It's really easy to navigate. It's free to access. They're not behind any kind of paywalls or anything like that. It's really straightforward. And I went on to check that they were working before we kind of came on, because I thought we don't even talk about them and then they're not. And literally within a couple of clicks, like, you're in. You can print them off for a lesson tomorrow. It doesn't have to be PE specific either. I think that's the crux of it, is any teacher across any subject area, primary or secondary, could pick them up. And if you're kind of looking at this as a hot topic in school at any point, it'll just be helpful, hopefully. And they're written by educators. We've not got football coaches to write them as educational resources. So just for a bit of reassurance that they are people that know what they're talking about from a teaching perspective too.
Fair enough. Moving on slightly, I want to go back to something that was, not moving on, going back. We've mentioned body confidence and body image issues a few times in a few different contexts. What does that look like? What does that issue look like for students, for staff? How can we recognize it? How can we help improve with that? Because to me, in my experience, that's possibly the biggest thing, because it's linked so closely to peer perceptions and their perception of self. And then why don't they want to be near the boys? Because they're scared of what the boys would think, or they see themselves a certain way and they don't want to. And when I worked at a girls' school for a number of years, that was so much less of a problem. So where does the body image issue fit into all of this?
I think in schools now, that this is not just girls, it's boys too. So it's across the board. We're getting more and more boys with body confidence issues, and obviously that's perpetuated with social media and this sort of image of the perfect body. I had been at an event today with a gladiator, one of the gladiators from TV, and she said something that really resonated with me, that we need to sort of promote this idea of females being strong and not skinny. And that sort of sat with me for the rest of the day, because I think that's really important, that females sometimes are seen as less strong, less aggressive, and actually if you come to my football tournaments, that's not the case at all. They're quite aggressive in their play, they're strong, they're good, they're talented. I think in terms, just going back to schools, this manifests itself in refusal to get changed in changing rooms at school, and this is in front of their friends. This is not a random group of people. I see that more and more in primary schools, where children are having to get changed in the toilets or elsewhere, which is really, really sad. And the other massive thing at the moment is PE kits. And I know the Youth Sport Trust have done a lot of work looking at what PE kit resonates with young people now. And I quite often tell my girls through the Go Lead resources, so it's a coaching program that we do with girls, I described to them my PE kit when I was at school, which was gym knickers and an Airtex white T-shirt. And they laugh and they think I'm joking. And that was what we wore all the way through school. And they then wondered why the girls didn't want to take part in PE and school sport. Thankfully, I know lots of schools now are really consulting with young people about what their kit should look like. And most of our schools do that now. So why would you not put children in kit they feel comfortable in? It doesn't make sense if we want them to be active, and not just in PE, but for the school day as well. So physical activity to me is not solely down to PE teachers. Our lessons should be as active as possible, because we know when young people move, they learn better. And that young person in secondary school can be sat down for 6 hours and not actually get up and move during the day. So it's not good for them. And then the other thing I think is really important is this idea of, who are our role models out there that promote different body types, and who can we use as a role model? And my mind goes back to the Red Roses, the Rugby World Cup. And one of the great things about that team is the amount of different body types that are represented. And they are strong, quick, fast, agile women that most girls can resonate with one or more of those body types. And we've got to be using them much, much more than we do at the moment. And I want to see them in schools. I want to see them on notice boards as examples of how you can be, not stick thin, but you can be strong and powerful and really successful at the same time. And I don't think we use those role models as much as we could.
I think one of the national stats that we have, which is really alarming, is that 63% of girls at secondary school disengage with sport because of their body confidence. That 63% is just unreal. And I guess, as Helen has said, some of those little changes around what they have to wear, giving the option of leggings instead of shorts, you know, if periods come into it, like we've had issues over the years with our professional teams of having to wear the same kit as the men's team, which is white shorts, which is just absolutely ridiculous because, you know, you think as a professional athlete, they have to deal with it. That's one thing. If you're a 13-year-old girl that's already a bit conscious about how you look, then you don't need to add that as another layer, as another barrier. So they're really simple things. And as Helen said, you know, I remember those gym knickers, like horrendous. But having the options, and if school, I know that they still need to look neat and tidy and they're still presentable in their school uniform, but just giving those little thoughts to what might actually be really helpful for a girl, and speak to the young people that you're with, like what is it that's putting them off? And girls, you can see who they are. You know, I used to work in a school, and you can see the girls that make excuses. They're bringing in sick notes. They're saying, I've got an injury, I can't do this, I've got an appointment for that. Target some of those girls and just have a conversation with them about what is the genuine reason that you don't want to get involved. Is it the activity that you're doing? Is it your kit? Do you feel a bit conscious about, you know, how you look? Are the sizes right? It's a myriad of things, but small little changes can make such a big difference.
I think that's. Sorry, Ray. I was just going to say, I think that's really true, because I've never met a girl that's told me she hated football. When we've tried to unpick what it is that they actually don't like, it's not the physical skill of playing the game. It's the fact they've got to get changed, or it's the fact that they hate the kit, or it's the fact that they're on their period, or it's the fact that they're not with their friends. It's not actually the game. So we've got to kind of dig a bit deeper when we have these surface level conversations and we think it's the game, because quite often it isn't.
I have met girls that could not care less about sports, but they are the smallest minority of people. Yeah. I think 99.9% have other reasons. Can we just clarify? Sorry. So those gym knickers that everyone had to wear, when did that stop?
I don't know.
My foreign brain is really confused. So people were wearing what is essentially underwear. Were girls having to do this? Were they having to participate and wear this when they were having their periods as well?
Yeah, I mean, I went through the whole of school, and other than netball, where we had a netball skirt, we were expected to wear gym knickers, a white t-shirt. We didn't even have a jumper or something to keep us warm. And we would go out and play fixtures against other schools like that as well. And particularly when you're on your period, this is, you know, it's really exposing. And, you know, we wondered why certain girls didn't want to take part. And actually, it wasn't because they didn't like athletics, football, whatever we were doing. It was because of the kit. And that's such an easy fix. You know, we have, again, we're just coming back to Muslim girls that like to sort of dress modestly. And quite often they say we would prefer to wear baggier kits. Mm-hmm. Why would we not allow them to do that if it means they take part? Yep. Why would we not allow a little bit of leeway in order?
What is the reason given? Usually in those
traditionally
cases?
It's because this is our kit and this is what you will wear. And
yeah.
I hear that less and less, but there are still lots of schools that this is the strict kit and we aren't allowed to deviate away from this. And actually what you end up with is a load of girls sat at the side with notes excusing them from PE because they've come up with some reason as to why they can't take part. And actually they do want to take part, but they want to feel comfortable while they're doing it. As adults, why are we not encouraging that?
I mean, I think we've got a lot better when it comes to, you know, I mean, you mentioned earlier, Helen, about the trauma of like school PE, and Ray's heard me probably tell this story before, but Mr. Denham, you know, I still remember it. But he was a PE teacher in my school, and I'll never forget, I was in like year 7 or 8, and it was all boys, so we were out, and literally this is like pre-climate change, so every session felt like you were in like the Russian Arctic in Birkenhead. You know what I mean? It was like, oh no, we've got to go out there again, you know. And most kids actually did it, right? So including me. I shouldn't have. So anyway, I was like there, and I was like, every week I used to dread it. Anyway, Mr. Denham. So we were out there, and Mr. Denham, everyone was there, 30 kids doing the warm-up. And I can't even remember what I did. It was probably nothing. But Mr. Denham was like, "Oi, Ginge, do 20 now." And I had to do 20 press-ups, which I couldn't do in front of, because I was in year 7 or 8, in front of all the other kids. And obviously everyone was laughing. It was like, but I think PE and sports in schools, like they have moved on so much from, you know, the sort of 90s, like just what it was like, you know.
Ginge.
Oi, Ginge. You're not allowed to say that to me, Ray. No, you can. You can and you will.
I had a similar experience at school, and it was swimming, and they put swimming on a Friday morning, and the result of putting it on a Friday morning was someone like me, who I have to straighten my hair and dry my hair, otherwise it's out here. And you could see the swimming group, because it was the group that walked around wet hair all day. And the result of that was, you know, half the group were on their period for 8 weeks. Yep. That's what happened. And there's such an easy fix to it, to put it on Friday afternoon so you can get ready, go home. And a lot of these things are really easy to fix when you understand what the issue is. But in order to understand what the issue is, you have to ask the children, you have to ask the girls. Because on the face of it, we just didn't like swimming, but actually we did. We just didn't like the bit that came afterwards, or the bit that came before.
And I think you're right in mentioning the boys as well, because there will be boys who dodge things for different reasons and similar body confidence or body awareness issues. Do you think that, I was just going to touch on the issue of peer groups, like in schools, often you find that it can be the peer group who are creating this atmosphere, whatever it is. So from an education perspective, how is that? Is that something that you work with, or is that something that you try and split up somehow? Or is that, if that's the culture that's there, how do you do that? How do you sort of take them out of the group, if you like, and say, do you know what? No, there's a different world, there's a different way of doing things.
I just think you've got to manufacture conversations with them where you get to understand why. Because I think, in my experience, most young people want to behave and they want to do well and they want to learn. I had an example in my last school. I had a really challenging year 11 group. Really found it was a struggle to get them to behave in lessons. I had them Friday afternoon. It was a battle every single week. And we got to the point where I sat them down in the gym and I said, right, listen, nothing that I have put on for you is working. Nothing is engaging you. What do you want to do? What do you want from this lesson? And I remember one girl who was quite poorly behaved around the school, and she said, we just want to get fit for the prom. That's all we are bothered about. And at that point, from that one question, I said, right, next week, we're going to get all the fitness things out. And every single girl in that group brought their PE kit from that day to the day of the prom, because they just wanted to look good for their prom. And that, I think that's my daily reminder, actually, that we should listen more. And maybe just that one question opens the door to that group, rather than just deciding that we're just going to ignore that or not work with them. And sometimes, as I say, it's a really, really easy fix.
And do you know what? I think one of the positives to come out of COVID, we're many, but so many schools now let kids dress in their PE kit on their PE day, especially in primaries, you know, and that's such a quick thing as well. You know, if kids are worried about getting changed in front of their friends, and in primary, they're kind of all shipped into the hall, they all get changed in front of each other, boys, girls, whatever. Just taking that little thing out, I think makes, you know, a big difference. And I guess going back to your question, Tom, around peer groups, I would guarantee that at least 50% of whatever peer group you're talking about would have an interest in football. It's there. So kind of, I guess, going back to the role that the game can play, it's such an easy win for the conversation opener, or the entry point to kind of break some of those myths or kind of have a look at it. So I'm hoping that we're trying to do our bit to kind of help teachers with some of these really difficult conversations.
I think the other thing is that this isn't just about playing. You know, there's so much more to football than just what we do on a football pitch. So we've used, with some of those more difficult groups, we use the FA and the Youth Sport Trust's coaching programs. We engage them in coaching because we've found, particularly with those girls that really struggle with self-regulation at school, they may not be the best footballers and they don't want to be the next Lionesses, but they're amazing at coaching, or they're fantastic at refereeing. So there's more than one way into football for girls, and we've got to utilise those other methods, because playing doesn't excite and motivate every girl, and they have different reasons for being in the game. And we need more female referees, more female coaches. We need that next generation that are going to govern the game going forward. And it does start in schools by giving them those opportunities to, develop the skills that they'll need. So I think it's, Breaking Barriers is one of the programs. Stacey will probably say more about this, but there's coaching programs. There's Go Lead, Go Referee, Go Coach. They're all programs that have come out of the FA, and we're using those programs to reach our hardest to reach girls, and they really do work. And some of our biggest success stories are those that have sort of turned themselves around through some of those programs. So I think in terms of breaking down those barriers, these programs have been really effective.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think that, we talked, just to finish off on this part about body confidence, how do you, should we be looking to facilitate? So you mentioned, Stacey, about, and I think this is like a huge issue, is getting change for PE, right? Or getting change for swimming, right?
Swimming.
Yeah, swimming. How do we change that within? Do we try to change that within each child who is experiencing that, or do we make amendments or adjustments to try to sort of not change that, but sort of accept that for what it is and how they feel, and then make adjustments, find out what the issue is and then make adjustments ourselves to facilitate that? Or should we be looking to sort of coach the child sort of to be able to deal with it, if that makes sense? Or is that something where you look at it and go, you shouldn't have to deal with that? That's just the cultural way that we've developed sport in this country, and you shouldn't have to deal with it. So maybe there's another way we can do it.
Yeah,
Stacey, you could answer that probably.
Yeah, and I think, you're all kind of current teachers and know way better than I do, but there are really simple kind of tweaks that can be made. I've mentioned the example about, from a primary school perspective, like coming to school in your PE kit on the day that you have PE.
Yeah,
would be a really kind of simple way for kids to feel,
definitely,
just more comfortable than dreading coming into school on that day, because they know that they're going to have to get changed. They might really look forward to PE, but, it might be worrying them all day, thinking about what they might have to do at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I think from a secondary school perspective, just giving girls the space that they need. Helen mentioned around the Muslim girls scenario that they had, like, how can schools maybe just slightly tweak or adapt where the changing rooms might be? Is there another private space for girls to adjust their hijab if that is an issue? It doesn't have to be a formal kind of PE changing room. There could be a separate space in that school. It's just tailoring it to the individual needs of the pupils. But I think almost asking what it is that they need is really important. And certainly from a football perspective, there are so many different reasons why girls might not want to take part. It might be the kit, it might be the changing issue, it might be because they've got boys on the sideline, it might be because the facility's kind of on show, so they've got boys walking around at lunchtime. There's so many different reasons, but unless you ask the question around why, and are really inclusive. My daughter, when she was at primary school, she's in year 7 now, but a few years ago, there wasn't a girls' football team at their school, and they didn't have girls' football at lunchtimes. Now, she played for a club, like she's not ever going to be a lioness, but loved kind of the team environment, playing with her friends. And so she asked a question to one of the teachers, like, why isn't there a girls' team? Like, the boys have got about 5. Like, why isn't there a girls' team? Why can't we play at lunchtime? And they couldn't really answer. So she went through their school council, got a little petition, kind of went round all of Key Stage 2, asked the other girls if there was a girls' football club at lunchtime on a Thursday, like who would join in? And there were so many names, but it was a girls-only kind of club. And the reason that so many of them weren't playing is because they just weren't getting access to a girls-only session. The school was saying, of course they can join in with the boys, but they never felt comfortable to do it. So it's just really trying to dig a little bit deeper from my perspective. I have to say they're an amazing school. Now have girls football, including a team. I'm going to pin it all on my daughter, but yeah, it's all good.
This sort of leads nicely on. I mean, what do you think is the biggest, most successful tactic for addressing the barriers we've discussed today? You know, we've discussed various different barriers, but what's the most successful tactic?
I think for me, it's, as I said before, stepping into their world, asking them. That's where all our projects start. We cannot design programs for girls when we do not understand their perspectives, motivations for taking part. And we've got to make girls visible within schools. We've got to promote what we're doing. We're only going to do that if we have continued funding from organisations like Barclays, fund the girls' football partnerships, and strategic leads that can do this work. So we've got to have that visibility. I mean, we had some Muslim girls that were coaches for us. They were absolutely fantastic. And we were lucky enough that the FA came to film some of their work with us. And those images then went nationally. They were on everything. They were, very famous in the football world. They were on absolutely everything. And those girls went back into school and like superstars. And actually, they said to me, the boys have been coming up to us and asking us how we got involved. And they've been saying to us, how can we do this? And again, it's that conversation, like football's a common language, isn't it? Those girls never spoke to those boys before they did that programme. But they've got this common language and interest now, and that's football. And actually, one of those girls went on to become head girl. She started that project off with very low confidence. So the impact of that one programme was massive for her. And I think we've just got to keep things visible. As adults and educationalists, we need to make sure that we're treating girls in the same way that we treat boys and celebrating their success in the same way.
I think for me, the one tactic would be to give teachers the language and the tools to just start the conversation. We know from the stats that we've already kind of talked about that teachers don't feel confident in this space, not because they lack ability, just because it's a really tricky subject. And if football can help and these resources can help in, even the smallest way, it's just about starting that conversation, and you never know what can spark then a different train of thought for boys and girls as being part of that initial conversation that they've had that they think is just talking about football.
Yeah. I mean, how do you go about like the more subtle misogyny? Like, what would you say, what does that look like? What is that? And how do you go about that?
I think what Helen said around role models is huge, like having visibility of, females in sport around school. Like, how do we talk about these successes of female athletes in and around? Like, we've probably never been in a more powerful position from a women's sport perspective. You mentioned the Red Roses. We're world champions in rugby. We're back-to-back European champions in football, like big team sports. Some of our players now, Chloe Kelly, you see the boys in the playground almost doing like a run up a Chloe Kelly step when they're taking a penalty. Like, how do we use these female, like, amazing role models that we have to just talk about, why you love Chloe Kelly, you do the penalty step. Like, why wouldn't you encourage some of your mates in school to have a go at this? Like, you never know, they could be the next Chloe Kelly. Like, it's just, it's a really tricky one, but I think really small steps in having those role models kind
I
of
don't know
up
if
and
this
about
makes
still
me
be
bad,
amazing.
but I put that run up in the same bracket of other really bad penalty run ups in the men's game. I'm sorry, guys.
Do you know what? If it works for her, we'll take it. We're not bothered. She
Yeah.
can do it under pressure, so we're good.
Oh dear.
I do think you're right, Tom, in the sense that some of these things are subtle. So I saw on social media about 6 months ago, a girls and a boys team went to a tournament and the winners got their trophy at the end. The boys' trophy was double the size of the girls' one. And it's really subtle things like that that don't seem small, but the symbolism of that to the girls, that it's less of an achievement, is huge. If you're an 11-year-old girl and you're seeing that, it's reinforcing this view that it's less of an achievement. So we've got to get really simple things like that right. And actually, I think the boys gave the girls their trophy to have in their photo. So we do have great male role models, boys that really are supporting girls. But we just need to make sure that those things are right for our girls moving forward.
And also for teachers to kind of open up the opportunities, and whether it's football or any other sport. I remember a primary head saying to me that she'd had a young person that had been attending every after school club, wanting to get involved in sport for such a long time, but they were never going to make the A team. Like, they just weren't talented in that way, but they gave their all. And she said, we included them in, I think it might have been a cricket tournament. And she said, for them to pull on the school shirt for the first time, to have that camaraderie with the friends, to have parents cheering for them on the sideline, they will never forget that moment. And I think teachers maybe underestimate the influence that they can have by just opening that one opportunity up for that one young person in a football team or in another scenario. That young person will probably have taken that memory with them well into high school. It'll have kept them going, it'll given them confidence to go and try other things. So teachers are amazing people who can offer amazing things to young people. Just don't underestimate the power of what you can do.
Definitely. So the next 5 years then, if we everybody working in education, whether it be teachers or any other adult, and in the profession in general, if we get this right, what does this look like in 5 years then from now?
Do you want to go, Helen?
Yeah, I agree with what you've just said, actually. I don't think there's ever been a better time to work in women's sport and with girls in schools. We've never had as many role models, successes. I never thought I'd see the Lionesses win a major tournament in my lifetime, and they've done it twice in 4 years. So we've never had a better platform to propel this message forward. We've now got the finance, the support. We've got amazing collaborative partners, Youth Sport Trust, Barclays and the FA, that are all working together. We've got a network of people on the ground working in schools and with schools. And we've got girls that want to play. The appetite is there. They want to play, but we've now got to open those opportunities up. So it's a fair playing field for every girl. Girls are not asking for special treatment. They want equal treatment. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in the space. So hopefully in 5 years' time, we're at a point where every girl feels like there's something there for me and that they belong in the game. I think the only thing that I would like to see more of is that representation at all levels of the game. As I said at the beginning, my partnership is very multicultural. And if they can't see it, they don't believe that they can become that person. So that first female that's wearing a hijab in the national team, that is going to be transformative for girls in my area. And I can go through multiple examples, but that representation is really, really important. But we're really excited to see where the journey goes, and that there's still so much more to do. But when I think back to when I was at school and where we are now and the work that's been done, it's phenomenal, really. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
Yeah, I think for us, and it is, I guess, I know you're asking me the question about looking forward, but I was chatting today about, we've had 85% growth in female teams in the last 5 years, which is just phenomenal. We've got over 250,000 players outside of school that are in the affiliated game. the growth is absolutely phenomenal. And I guess there's lots of work going on in the background. It starts with schools. Girls get their first opportunity to see football at school. But the difference that then makes kind of further up the ladder, gives us a bigger talent pool. It allows the diversity to come through. There's such a lot of work going on in the talent space to make sure that girls from different backgrounds are accessing our talent pathways. We hope that that will continue. We're never going to continue to double every 5 years. But I think as well as all of that, if we can introduce girls to football, if they can find confidence in sport and in life, we've done our job. And that's hopefully what collectively we can do.
Yeah, perfect. So what's one message you would give to a girl in school today who's unsure whether sport is for her?
For me, it has got to be that there is a place for you in football. The whole campaign that we're talking about, Made for This Game, has replaced what used to be Let Girls Play. So we have a huge campaign around hashtag Let Girls Play that many schools, teachers, young people will be familiar with, but almost the time for asking permission has now passed. So Made for This Game is almost the next step. And as Helen said, it doesn't matter if you're a player, if you're a coach, a referee, a fan, a volunteer, there is a place for you in football. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If you are interested, there is a place for you and we will find where that place is. That would be my kind of overarching message.
Yeah, I would just say be brave, go for it. If there's an opportunity there and you've got a passion and you want to get involved, be brave. Because those girls that have started their football journey with us, they didn't start off as confident people, most of them anyway. They just took that first step. And actually, there's so much support and so many opportunities. I would love to be a girl these days with the opportunities that are out there to become involved in the game. So, you know, have that bravery and go for it. And you never know where you might end up.
Just to say, if you've enjoyed this conversation and anything's resonated, then obviously it'll be available as a podcast afterwards, so you can watch and listen back. Also, you should visit the website that, if you're watching this via video, is on screen now. But if not, it's girlsfootballinschools.org/made-for-this-game. But to make it easier, just go on Google and type in FA Made for This Game. So you can visit that website, find the resources. They're absolutely fantastic. And they build on a lot of the conversations we've had here in terms of the barriers and how to overcome them, awareness, things that you can implement in your environment to sort of facilitate some of the things that we're talking about here. So absolutely check it out. Really easy to access. And Teachers Talk Radio are big fans of it. So yeah, have a look at it. Just want to say a massive thank you to Stacey and Helen for coming on TTR today. Really, really enjoyed the chat. Obviously, we'll follow up the conversation. If you want to make a comment on it, or if you have anything to say, get in touch with Teachers Talk Radio. You know, drop us a message through the website or on social media and tag us there and let us know any thoughts or questions that you've got. But I just want to say a big thanks to everybody who's tuned in live and everybody who finds this on playback and has watched through. So massive thanks to everyone out there who's done that. Yeah, we'll be back again soon as always on Teachers Talk Radio. But as I say, just to emphasize, Made for This Game. Check it out. It'll help to review everything that we've talked about today. So thank you, Helen and Stacey. I hope you have a good remainder of the week. And yeah, we'll see you soon, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused